Good evening, everyone. Before the start of the session, let us chant Namo Tassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavatu Arahatu Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavatu Arahatu Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavatu Arahatu Samma Sambuddhassa. We had a beautiful and illuminating discussion last week with regards to the Cetanā Sutta that we started discussing and going over. What we are going to be dealing with today is the second and the third part of that sutta, right? We went over some very neat. Yes.
Bhante, the last sutta, the first one, we stopped at page 60, but we did not go through the conscious arising suffering, the last two paragraphs of it. Do we need to today?
All right. Yes, we will go through that one as well. Thank you, David, for the reminder. All right. So to go over what we have covered during our last session, we have gone over, we spoke about volition and how this sutra presents a very unique case from what we usually sort of do study, which is how volition, consciousness affects jati, jara, marana, adi, dukkha, right? That process. We pulled out the chart on the Paticcasamuppada, right? And we discussed according to that Paticcasamuppada chart as well, where from consciousness, this part, where it goes into birth, right? How it's sort of that effect, how it happens. In that discussion, we spoke about anusaya, we spoke about vasana, the nature of anusaya and the nature of vasana we spoke about, right? Which built on a very illuminating conversation and discussion with regards to the sutra. So let us continue where we picked off. So as Devika mentioned, we haven't covered this part. So it is a short sutra, so let's go through the beginning. The conscious arising of suffering. The conscious arising of suffering. Bhikkhus. What one intends and what one plans and has latent tendency, this is a mental basis for the support for consciousness, for the support for consciousness. When there is mental basis, consciousness is established. When that consciousness is established and grows therein, there is further arising of rebirth. When that consciousness is established and grows therein, there is further arising of rebirth. When there is further arising of rebirth, there further arise birth, decay, and death, sorrow, lamentation, physical pain, mental pain, and despair. Such is the arising of this whole mass of suffering. Such is the arising of this whole mass of suffering, right? The unconscious arising of suffering. if bhikkhus, one neither intends nor plans, but if one still has latent tendency, there is a mental basis, arambana, that supports consciousness. If bhikkhus, one neither intends nor plans, but if one still has latent tendency, this is a mental basis that supports consciousness, right? That is a mental basis which supports consciousness. When there is a mental basis, there is a support for consciousness. When consciousness has a support and grows, there is further continued arising of rebirth. When there is a further arising of rebirth, there is further arising of birth, death, decay, and death, sorrow, lamentation, physical pain, mental pain, and despair. Such is the arising of the whole mass of suffering. Such is the arising of the whole mass of suffering. So now, in the first instance, we discussed a scenario where, or the sutra enlightens upon the scenario where there is plan, there is intention, that there is a plan, right? In this situation here, there is no intention, no plan. However, a arambana arises. However, a arambana arises, an object arises. This object, as long as there is a latent tendency, right? As long as there is a latent tendency, that object, the perceivable and the cognizing of that object will be done in such a manner where it will somehow bring that pain associated with the loss or the corruption, or however we would define that moment, the object will go through that change and bring pain to the mental basis that is the consciousness. If we are to take any story, right? If we are to take any story with regards to pleasure, the story of pleasure is determined by how long or how far the story goes. Because every story, even if it is a happy ending would mean that the story did not go beyond or long enough. Should it go long enough, it will always end in death, in loss, right? Not to sort of look at it in a very pessimistic manner, but this is the whole mass of suffering. Although we would have a healthy body in the beginning when we are younger, that health of body, the story of that health is truly determined by how long we choose to speak on, or the duration that we are considering with regards to that health, because that health is going to fade. That health is by nature going to fade. The healthy ego, the ego of health that we once held with such pride, where we would say, I've never been to a clinic, I've never been to a hospital. One fine day, we will have to go to a clinic or hospital. Why? Because by nature, with nature, by the power and the spirit of nature, this goes through a process of decay, right? This goes through a process of decay. So, where does that is nature. But where does the latent tendency now draw in here? How does the latent tendency affect the story? The latent tendency affects the story in a manner where it will cling on to, or perceive the object in a manner where now that object is able to create or bring about suffering to the being. right? Suffering to the being. Even if we are to take Kamaraga Anusaya with regards to everything that is pleasant, everything that we sort of yearn and look for, even if we are to take with regards to Patiga Anusaya, everything that we choose to sort of dispel and throw away from our lives, right? There is a sense of dedication or taking of object in a manner where it will give rise to now what? Pain. With the Kamaraga Anusaya, the pain will appear when the object of karma disappears. With the Patiga Anusaya, the pain will arise when the Patiga is present. Right? With the Bhavaraga Anusaya, the object of pain will arise when the Bhava that is sought out for is going to close. Right? When the with the Mana Anusaya, the object of pain will arise when the conceit is challenged. Right? When conceit is challenged. With Ditti Anusaya, the object of pain will arise when our views are challenged. With Vichikicca Anusaya itself destabilizes the mind in a manner where that restlessness, that instability of mind, Vichikicca, doubt will sort of creep its way into all the states of mind where we will not have anything but doubt. That itself becomes the pain that we will go through. Why can't I trust? Why is it that there is no one that I could trust? Vichikicca Anusaya, spreading its roots throughout, creeping. Avidya Anusaya. Avidya Anusaya, the object of Avidya Anusaya is the fact that simply sometimes, even visible with clarity, this is painful, this is not beneficial, this is something that does me harm. How yet I am unable to bring about the energy to do myself right. Because somehow the mind skewers to what I am used to, what I think I deserve, what I am comfortable of having experienced something that is a state that I'm comfortable with. That becomes the object of pain. Now that is where there is no plan, there is no intention. There is no intention, there was no plan. However, the object is present and Anusaya is present. Hence, there is going to be the whole mass of suffering. That whole mass of suffering is because of birth. If one is to become, one has to go through these levels, these experiences. It is a must. That is where the Buddha said there is no way that we can free ourselves entirely. Whilst being within this samsara, the only way that we can truly free ourselves is through emancipation, through nibbana, and exiting samsara. Yeah, the ending of suffering. The ending of suffering. But bhikkhus, insofar as one neither intends nor plans, and if one has no latent tendency, then there is no mental basis for the support for consciousness, When there is no mental basis, their consciousness is not established. When consciousness is not established and does not grow, there is no further arising of rebirth. When there is no further rising of rebirth, there ends further birth, decay, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, mental pain, and despair. Such is the ending of the whole mass of suffering. Such is the ending of the whole mass of suffering. Right. Now, relating to the fact of, right, when there is no mental basis, their consciousness is not established, right? Their consciousness. So talking about a position of enlightenment, if we are enlightened, if we are able to come into a position where the latent tendencies are not present, then there will be no mental basis, right, for such arammanas or such deprecating arammanas to arise. Hence, what happens is that does not support the consciousness. Hence, when consciousness is not established and does not grow, ඒ කියන්නේ සංස්කාරය ඇති වෙන්නේ නැහැ. When those particular sanskaras don't arise, there is no further arising of rebirth. When there is no further arising of rebirth, there ends further birth, decay, and death, sorrow, lamentation, meaning we do not create the karmas that gives rise to rebirth into different states. A good question is, now this is clear, right? This is clear. And we've read this part before, although not in this sutra. We've read this part before. We know what this part is. When you attain enlightenment, you will not have the latent tendencies. The impurities of consciousness will no longer exist. One will not be reborn within the woeful planes, even after Sotapannaship, right? Hence, jolly good. Within 7 births, we will be able to attain enlightenment because of the progressive nature of kusala, right? So we will be able to. But one question while reading this, right? Whilst reading this is, with regards to consciousness is, what are the daily things that you and I can do in order to raise the vibration of consciousness in such a manner that I could now sort of filter through the processes or the usual process, the usual human processes, which would usually sort of pull me down or sort of create unwholesome energies within me, right? Because at the end of the day, anusaya being present, anusaya will create energies that will create rebirth, right? Rebirth means more of these experiences that creates even further rebirth, birth. And through that, the whole dukkha khanda, right? This is exactly what we want to get out, the cycle that we want to leave. Where can I start? I was wondering, right? What is the frame Buddhism, the Buddha's teachings offer a person, a frame, a template that can be sort of aligned to each one of us, that could allow a person, although not enlightened, that would allow a person to, I would believe, now this is my thinking, I would believe the importance is integrity, right? Meaning integrity not in the sense of the quality of integrity, right? But more in our associations, self becomes a pillar of how we associate people. And if this self does not have a wholesome sense of integrity, right, what would happen is, we have a word for this, people pleasing, right? We would become people pleasers to such an extent where we lose the integrity that we have for ourselves, and we are able to sort of, and we dilute ourselves just to fill another person's cup, right? Now, this is something that must not happen, because when you try to be a good person, we assume that this is a part of it where you sort of put yourself on the back burner and you allow or you give way to the wishes and intentions of others to a certain extent. And this can be most of the time abuse. So I believe integrity, right? What of the teachings can be applied to ensure this integrity, where I am not floating into a delusionary state of existence where I assume that my presence is for the satisfaction of others, which is not true. Right? බුදුහාමුදුරුවොත් කිව්වේ තමන් ඉස්සර කාලේ ඉන්න ඕනේ අනිත් මිනිස්සුන්ට දන් දෙන්නට කලින්. තමන් සිල් රැකලා ඉන්න ඕන අනිත් මිනිස්සුන්ට සිල් රකින්න කියා දෙන්න. Right? ඉස්සරාම තමන් නිවන් දැකලා ඉන්න ඕන අනිත් මිනිස්සුන්ව නිවන් දක්වන්න. Right? That sense of, so what does it say? We do not lose our integrity. Meaning we do not lose ourselves in sort of serving community or serving persons who might be close to us, but it is important that we maintain that sense of integrity, solidity, right? In a manner that self-sacrifice does not come. I would say that is important. The other part which is important is where the vibration of self or the vibration of the being is in such a position where this vibration is or operates at a level where it is not hindered by the mere actions of impermanent suffering and non-self. Right? I mean, because when impermanence happens, and if it is, for example, a person that we love or a person that we do not like, right? A person that we love leaving us, impermanence. It is something that causes us pain. Death is impermanence. It causes us pain. Saying goodbye to a person is impermanent. Losing something that we really love is impermanence, right? All of these things is painful, right? So at the face of impermanence, how can I maintain a vibration of mind that is stable, that that my whole life is overturned by this impermanence, is not overturned by this impermanence. Then suffering, when I go through suffering, how can I have the persistence of mind, the resilience of mind to experience this suffering, at the same time be able to not be hindered by this suffering, right? Then anatta, non-self, the fact that we do not have control. I fell madly in love with someone, right? And we thought that we were soulmates. And now we realize that it is not so. Things change. The fact that we are unable to control, right? My best friend is no longer my best friend because we change as persons, right? The element, the fact that we cannot control our minds, neither the minds of others. So getting rid of that illusionary narcissistic-like tendency where we try to assume control and godliness over our surroundings, over our demeanor, right? So what I thought was, or what I was thinking of, is how can we establish this, right? Without being enlightened, what are the practices which directly affects this sort of thing? Right? Directly affects this sort of thing. Because at the end of the day, we have enough experience in the world to realize that it is not, whilst we say that we might be Buddhist, that has nothing to do with the fact that we are good persons or not. We have seen enough Buddhists or enough people of other religions say it is all down to the practice. You can call yourself a Buddhist, but if you do not practice, if you do not have the training, if you're not committed to the training, you are going to make some very, very bad mistakes, especially when it comes to ego and judgment, right? So what can we do to raise our consciousness? I believe the first thing is metta. Loving kindness. Loving kindness does so much. Loving kindness does so much how? Loving kindness brings to light the frailty of human existence, the fragility and weakness existent within you and I, existent within the human intelligence, existent within samsara. It does not hide that fact. It brings to light that we are by nature flawed. The practice of Metta Bhavana allows us to cultivate a sense of resilience, a sense of vision with clarity, a sense of patience for this human intelligence, for this human life, for this samsaric journey. That is, I believe, very important for you and I. Metta, loving kindness, metta towards people around us, as well as this composition, mind and body, not because it is mine, but for the fact that we are all going through the ups and downs of life. You suffer as much as I am suffering. I suffer as much as the whole world is suffering. Right? In the Vishuddhimagga, it says, it points out, how do we know that a person is established in metta? The Vishuddhimagga points out to say, a person who is established in metta, if a murderer was to enter one's family home, where you are with the rest of the family, and was to ask you to decide who's going to die first, the Vishuddhimagga says a person who is well established in metta will not be able to determine who will be able to. He is unable, he will not offer self as sacrifice, neither will he sacrifice through word anyone of the relatives as well. Right? The decision cannot be made. Now, we would often assume as a mother, as a father, as a Buddhist monk committed to the goodness, as a son, whatever, as who we are, we would think, oh, we need to self-sacrifice ourselves. But the Dhamma says, no. Self-sacrifice is not intended in Buddhism in a manner where you sacrifice yourself, right? Isn't that the lack of metta towards oneself? Right? So the Vishuddhimagga points out, the person who is established in metta is categorically unable to sacrifice oneself physically, and then puts the decision back to the murderer who has entered the house by force. You can decide, I am not going to decide. Take who you want. Right? Metta is important. The other practice is anicca sanya over the pancha upadanaskandha. Now, this is repeated so many times within the whole context of the whole Sutta Pitaka, actually. Time and time again, the Buddha repeats and reiterates the importance of anicca sanya over the pancha upadanaskandha. Sinhalen කියනවා නම් pancha upadanaskandhe ඇතිවීම පැවතීම නැතිවීම මෙනෙහි කිරීමේ භාවනාව. පංචස්කන්ධේ ඇතිවීම පැවතීම නැතිවීම මෙනෙහි කිරීමේ භාවනාව, which can fall into the Satipatthanas as well. Because in the Satipatthanas as well, we take a part of the Panchupadanaskandha, the 5 aggregates of clinging, and we observe the rising, processing, and the passing away. This, when done in a manner, right, in a manner where we get the technique right, is so extremely powerful. Because we experience a reality with such close contemplation that we have never seen before in our mundane lives, which is the fact that, yes, this one thing does seem to arise and pass away. But then we realize, my word, all arises and passes away. Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vinyana, even the perception of perception arises and passes away. Even the fact that I think of myself, the self-concept also too arises and passes away. There are moments in our mind where absolutely everything disappears. Absolutely everything disappears, including the perception of materiality and mentality. Anicca sanya. Anicca sanya, metta bhavana. And then there needs to be something which guides us in a way, pointing some sort of pointing us towards something fueled by inspiration, right? Fueled by inspiration. There comes the Anusati Bhavana. Anusati Bhavana. Anusati Bhavana, Metta Bhavana, Anicca Sanya, Anusati Bhavana. This Anusati Bhavana, everyone, right, can be very, very powerful. Now, to those of you who are even listening to the recording afterwards, this Anusati Bhavana is powerful because of these reasons, right? And I'm going to connect it to the Metta Bhavana as well. Metta Bhavana and Anusati Bhavana, they are protective. They are strong vibration cultivating meditation techniques. The Metta Bhavana raises your consciousness because you are no longer burdened and dragged down by the petty, by the reality of this world. I'm sorry to call it petty, but by the realities of this world. It raises the bar. The more you practice, the bar is constantly raised, right? Anicca Sanya further enforces anicca, the realization that all of these things that we go through, from pleasure to pain, from greatness to weakness, everything from the highs, greatest of highs to the lowest of lows, is riddled in the nature, by the nature of impermanence. The Anusati Bhavanas gives us strength, right? Gives us strength. Now, let me tell you, because we went along this sort of line of story last time, I remember. So I'm going to, and I know as Sri Lankans, this is something that a lot of people also fear, which is occult sciences, for example. Occult, right? Now, in South Asian, right? And actually, we see it because I guess we see it more in Asia because most of us here are Asians, right? But we find it all across the world, these sorts of occult sciences, right, being practiced. And we know how serious such practices are in countries like ours, Sri Lanka, right? It's believed to a very great extent, right? And people fear this sort of thing, right? People fear this sort of thing. And the Buddha, during the time of the Buddha, such sciences existed and was practiced to a great amount, right? I mean, the rishis and all these sort of spiritual beings, right? Even Maharishi, for example, is a ghost, right? Maharishi is a ghost. And Maharishi to this day is seen by pious practitioners along the Himalayas, right? Now, I'm going to tell you a story not a story, but I'm going to tell you of an instance where one might feel, right? Where one might feel that one's energy has now been crowded. For example, it is a usual practice in sort of these occult sciences when you want to attack or when you want to see a person doing bad or do some evil to a person, to string a ghost onto a person, right? To bound a ghost to a person, right? So then this person sort of starts experiencing this presence, this evil presence, right, in that person's life, right? Standing behind them, the shadows of beings and all of these things, right? All of these things. Now, when this happens, even if you are a very lucky person, what can very easily happen is these sorts of entities suck the living energy out of you, literally, right? Crowd in the mind, instilling fear, instilling senses of that bring bad luck, if we might put it in that way, affecting your vibration, where you might sort of come to feel as if the luck or that good karma that you were born with is now sort of corrupted or it no longer exists. Now, let me tell you, good karma can never be taken away by anyone. Even the Buddha or the Maha Sakra or the great Brahma, no one can take away your good karma. But what can be taken away is the foundation that you have, right? For a person who is untrained in mind, that person's foundation for that good karma to give rise can be disturbed. That is what can be disturbed, right? Where, for example, usually this person's presence brings a great amount of, let's say, prosperity, right? Now, the person who believes in this and the person has no sort of defilements or hindering energies to this, this person just is. Now, with this presence sort of brings or sort of corrupts this foundation and makes a person believe that the person has now become now very weak, right? The person truly believes this. When this happens, now the bad luck starts. Why? You're laying the foundation for your bad karmas to now come about. Now you will start losing. Now your life, which had stability, now you will see instability in your life. How do we tend to this? Of course, occult sciences would have different ways that you could tend to it. But as long as you believe, or it all depends on, do you believe it or not? To a great extent, it is down to the fact of whether you believe it or not, right? Why? Because this energy needs to be changed in the first place, right? This energy. Now, in conversation with some doctors, right, in Sri Lanka, the Thoila and the Bali, right, the whole sort of devil dances, right? The devil dances also bring a sense of relief to people, because you see the fire dancers, you see the cutting of the pool, you see all of these things. And when people see this, their minds start believing, then you were right. That itself brings a great amount of change into their life. Why? The vibration now changes. The person starts believing that the dosa is now over. To a great extent, this matters. What is the Buddha's path of getting rid of energies such as that? The Buddha's path is this, the metta, which was prescribed, remember, to monks who were going through the same in the Andavanaya. The monks were being disturbed by the unwholesome energies, the ghosts, right? The Buddha prescribed metta bhavana, right? For this reason. Metta. The second is enforcing motivation. Buddhanusati, Dhammanusati, Sanghanusati, Chaganusati, Devanusati, the Anusati Bhavanas. Kindling the flames, kindling the fires, kindling energies that bring you strength, right? That bring you strength. Remember, when we talk about Janaka Karma is the life force, right? If you have 80 years of lifespan, that is your Janaka Karma. This Janaka Karma, there can be disturbances to this Janaka Karma, but not when the Janaka Karma is at its prime, right? Not when it's at its prime. When the Janaka force is at its strongest, then there needs to be a very powerful disturbance to interrupt this, the Janaka Karma. That is why even in occult sciences, when it comes to a powerful figure like a king or a president or a person of high government, occult sciences do not work on these persons to a great extent, right? Because these persons' Janaka Karma is simply too strong. Remember, Venerable Mahamoggallana was once possessed by Mara. right? In the Mara Tajaniya Sutta, the 50th sutra of the Majjhima Nikaya, it explains the situation. However, because of Mahamoggallana's Janaka Karma, the power of his presence, the Mara could not overtake and possess the whole body. He was only able to possess or be within the belly of Mahamoggallana, turning and churning the belly, right? To an extent where Mahamoggallana Theros felt a great sense of discomfort, but did not or was not able to overtake the whole mind, right? That is the power of presence, right? The power of metta, the power of that anusati, that established that sense of presence. That is what the greatest energy that we can cultivate is the fact of metta, right, in our lives. Let me tell you a real life story. A devotee of mine, once the devotee's mother passed away, the mother possessed the daughter. The daughter was my very close devotee. The daughter was badly possessed. I mean, she would devil dance. All of a sudden, while in the middle of high tea, she would start devil dancing. It was a very embarrassing situation because all of a sudden this woman would get up from her seat, she would break her hair and then start dancing. It was absolutely, I mean, it was affecting the whole family so deeply, right? She went to every soothsayer, every sort of kapua and everyone out there, spent millions upon millions trying to get this sort of energy out. She felt this presence so much because it started happening right after the funeral, right? Nothing worked. For years, she suffered. She did Buddha pujas and all of that. Nothing worked because she was also not in a stable state of mind to sort of cultivate anything because she was in constant fear and anxiety that whenever that she's in public, that this would happen, right? That this would happen. The kids would at times in the middle of the night, when the mother starts acting in this manner, the kids would have to run to the nearest temple and grab a pirit nool and run back home to tie it on the mother. It would be only then that the mother would calm down, right? Once when she was in Bodh Gaya, she was in the presence, she saw with her friends who were there, all there for a katina. She saw, this Venerable Jnana Lokatero, who is a venerable who meditates in Kailash most of the time in India. He's a very established sort of spiritual practitioner and a being, and he is very connected to these energies. So this is the first time that she met or seen Venerable Jnana Loka, however she has heard of him. She goes up to him and, thinks, maybe he could sort of do something for me. Maybe he could sort of show me a pathway out of this. She starts explaining to him what has happened and all of that. And then, of course, with great piety, she's worshipping him and, standing and sort of speaking to him. And then she feels, and then he starts sort of radiating enormous amounts of metta to this woman who he has just met, right? She experiences, and he sort of starts sort of shiver when he sort of starts doing this. And she experiences a thundering bang on her back, which sort of really sort of a very striking pain, right, on the back. And she's shocked almost, but she's maintaining decency because of the Thero who's right in front of her. She excuses herself and she goes near the, and she, because of the pain, she just breaks out into tears. From that day on, she did not experience the possessing. Up until now, she did not experience the possessing again. The power of metta. The power of metta. Right? The power of metta. That metta does a lot. How is it? How can we cultivate that sense of energy within us to repel these negative energies, to push our sense of presence to a level where we are able to now operate at a position where the dukkha kanda, whilst being present, will not further pull us down into its sort of mud. Do you understand? Right? Metta. anicca, and anusati in the practice, right? Metta, the protective, metta would fall under the protective, isn't it? The anusati bhavanas would also sort of be within that category. And the anicca sanya of the panchupadana skandha can actually be in the process of any of the satipatthanas, right? But that allows, let your fullest confidence be in the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha within the practice. Raising the bar for yourself, raising the bar for yourself, right? Raising the bar for yourself. Now, coming into the second sutra. Any questions before we move on to the second sutra?
Thank you for that explanation, Bhante. It was very good.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Bhante,
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
Bhante, we haven't done Anusati Bhavana with you. Shall we do it one day?
Well, we have done Buddhanusati, remember?
I can't remember.
Buddhanusati with metta, we often do it
Or
with
with
metta,
With
but we
metta.
can definitely do Anusati Bhavana, right? We can definitely do Anusati Bhavana. And also sort of we got the things, isn't it? We got the sort of the devices as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So we can do Anusati Bhavana for sure.
Okay.
Hmm?
I think most of us got the gadgets now.
Yes, yes. So we can start. Yeah. All right. Any questions or anything that people would like to ask? Okay.
Bhante, to get possessed, you have to it's normally a person with a weak mind, such as alcoholics, isn't it? If you are a religious person, no one can sort of enter into your psyche and you can't get possessed. It's mostly to weak people, isn't it? From what I heard, like alcoholics.
Yes, I mean, to a certain extent, and no, it depends on the power, right? It depends on the power, because sometimes even people, alcoholics, it truly depends on the power, right? Now, what happens with alcoholics, right, is the fact of their energies, right, which has a very demeaning energy, right? The stability of mind is weak, with which also when we have sort of a lot of tree, what is said is the fact that when we have a lot of trees and sort of whatever in a household where it is a very alcoholic like atmosphere, right, these sort of trees and sort of the environment around the house will not be attracting wholesome energies, right? Now people often say, it is believed that in the sharing of merit, one should not do it at home because these relatives come and they don't go. That is completely not true. If they wanted to come and not go, they would have come and not go in the first place, right? You don't need to sort of do this in that manner. That it is like a dansala, you see. A relative of yours might be giving a dansala. You come to the dansala vandala, kala, හොඳට බඩ පුරවගෙන කෑම පැකට්ටයක් ගෙදරට අරන් යන්නත් දැනගෙන ආපහු දන්සල යනවා දන්සල එතන ඉන්නේ, right? The thing is, because there is no purpose to continue to stay in the dansala after everything has been done, right? It doesn't happen like that. The energy that we are talking about, it is a lot to do with what are we surrounding ourselves with. When it comes to practitioners, right, the energies around these practitioners are also strong because there are protective layers, right? For a person whose mind is always on the negative, the protective layers keep on sort of fading and sort of up until there is no protection, right? For example, let us say you, as if you have a large family, you have the protection of the family. If you have family in influential places and powerful places, you have protection from the family. If your children are able to support you, you have protection of your children. You don't have to think about a lot of stuff because at the end you have something to fall back on, right? It is like that, you see. We have each and every one of us have protective layers, right? It's like guardians. You like it or not, there are going to be beings or protective beings around you. You have friends in Sansara, you have relatives who are taking care of you, right? You have all these energies and beings, like it or not, they'll be there, right? And of course, in the UK, when we sort of think about it, most of these houses, now the house that I am living in was built in the 1700s, right? It's a very old house, right? Now, from the 1700s to now, just imagine how many people have died in this house, right? How many people have died in this house? And that is no problem, right? That is not an issue, because at the end of the day, when our energy levels are high, and that is what needs to be noted, right? When the energy levels are high, that is what it repels. It repels beings who want to do you harm, right? When you, for example, let us say you are driving around in a big car, right? And this sort of, fellow comes about, drunk or whatever he sees you in your glory, and he does not even challenge you because he knows he can't pick a fight with you. The same, I'm sorry to use that sort of example, but it is very similar. When your energy is there, this energy is felt, just like, for example, animals can sense it far more than humans can, right? These sort of unseen beings can feel it even more, right? This energy of mind, you do not need to focus on anything, just focus on simply this mind and body. Body, why? Body, because this body, if it is already, what you put into it, if it is creating a putrid like sense inside the body, that affects your vibration, right? It affects the polar energies of our body, right? The mind, however, is the most powerful, right? The mind is the most powerful. When you have the power of metta, when you have the ability of samadhi, when you have the enforcement through the anusatis, when you have all of this with you, right? You are unbeatable, truly unbeatable, right? To an extent where Samma Dittika Devatas will be there for your protection, right? Will be there for your protection. Even if you would see even if you would sort of see in your own gardens, if you have a lot of flowers or whatnot, start offering all of those flowers and the beauty of your garden to the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha. And you will find that your garden will start growing in such a healthy manner. The flowers blooming, many things. Start offering. I think this was actually taught to us by Venerable Navini Aridamathero, because he would go to Peradiniya Malvatta, he would go to the Malvattas in Burma, and he made this gatha where he is offering these flowers, me Malvala Lassana, me Suanda, ev okkama Buddha Piyanan Vahansala Buddha Dhamma Sangha Ratneta offer karana. He think, right? And you find, especially when it's in your own garden, you find that ability. Why? That vibration attracts the better energies, meaning even the even even what I mean by energies is good spirits, good energies, right? Unseen energies come, and those energies now are your protective layer. Add to your protective layer, right? There is nothing to be afraid of. There's nothing to be afraid of. The more, why are you afraid? Because your energy levels are low, right? Your energy levels are low. That is why you are afraid. Fear arises towards these things. There's nothing to be afraid, right? If we have that understanding, we are able to sort of repel those negative spirits and energies. But of course, to a certain extent, it truly depends again on the power of those beings. That is why on the last spectrum, on the last of that, within the sutra, it says the last thing that you can do is the atanatya. calling upon the power of the protective, of the lords of the underworld, right? To sort of ensure the protection of you and your family in the spirit of the teachings of the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha, the Athanatya Sutta. The Buddha preaches the Athanatya Sutta as a way of dispelling all of this, right? As a way of dispelling all of this, right? So, Dil, you have your hand up?
Yeah, yes, Bhante. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Bhante, thank you very much for that explanation, because as you mentioned, right, what I've learned from quantum science is that the biggest thing that has the power, the protection is energy vibration. And it's like regret, when you have, these are all layers of vibrations, when you have fear and anxiety, and that's why this metta-anusati is so, metta bhavana is so powerful, because the opposite of fear is love, and his loving kindness. So when you do metta bhavana, that, like, I mean, when you're in non-Buddhist terms, when scientists talk about, when you have this unconditional pure love, like in the Karni Metta Sutta, or radiating that in Metta, but that is the highest vibration you can give. And when the vibrations are high, that negative forces cannot get in. Not only the things like these spirits and all these whatever from the underworld, but also things like the microorganisms, like even COVID. So in fact, people whom I know who are very progressed in the Dhamma, and who are considered, though they don't say that they are like Sotapanna, but they didn't even take the injections, and they didn't even take anything. And I'm surprised, the vaccine, I'm surprised, because some of these people, their families, everybody they gave them, but these people weren't even concerned. And I said, why? If you don't believe, why are you giving your wife, and why are you giving your children? And they didn't say. But these are people who are very, very, you can know that their practices are very, very spiritual. So that's why when you're tired and when you're weak, or when you have had challenges in your life, and when you're not well, your vibrations are lower. So then you're much more susceptible to infection. So on a day when you feel like that, is much better to wait and to do metta bhavana, and to raise your vibrations. And the other thing is, metta is very, very powerful, but compassion and gratitude are also equal. So like the anusati bhavanavas and devanusati, and giving gratitude, they have measured this, Bhante, and they know the wavelengths and strengths, and it's proven beyond doubt. So what you're explaining in this sutta, which the Buddha said, is now what is being talked in scientific terms, without any alluding to the Buddha, exactly what you're saying, Bhante. And it's not whether, of course, if you have got like mental depression, and if you've got mental states like that, or you're all over the place and you're distractible, then again your mind is not focused. But certainly, and if you are alcoholics and things like that, but it's the vibrations of fear as opposed to love. Fear, anxiety, doubt, regret, those are very, very low. So the importance of that bojjhangas, and seeing, as soon as you are aware of these things, of course, later on it will become automatic to realize and change those into gratitude, into loving kindness. It's so important even to the people who do the worst things to you. It's only when you can change that to that state that you can have this kind of protection. And it's so proven without doubt. So I just want to thank you, Bhante, for the sutta and your explanation.
Thank you, dear. Now, if we are able to now move on to the Cetanā Sutta, right? The Cetanā Sutta, the second one. Here we find, let's go through it, the conscious arising of suffering. Bhikkhus, what one intends and what one plans and what latent tendencies one has, this is a mental basis, arambana, for the support for consciousness. When there is a mental basis, consciousness is established. When that consciousness is established and grows, there is the descent of name and form. There is the descent of name and form. With name and form as condition, there are 6 bases. With the 6 bases as condition, there is contact. With contact as condition, there is feeling. With feeling as condition, there is craving. With craving as condition, there is clinging. With clinging as condition, there is existence. With existence as condition, there is birth. With birth as condition, there arise decay, death, sorrow, lamentation, physical pain, mental pain, despair. Right? Because when one intends and what one plans and what one's latent tendencies that one has, this is the mental basis for the support of consciousness. Right? Such is the arising of the whole mass of suffering. Right? The whole mass of suffering. The start of that suffering, again, it comes down to when one intends, when one plans, and what latent tendencies one has. ඒ කියන්නේ මේ අපි ඇතුළෙම තියෙන යම්කිසි යථාර්ථයක් හින්දා තමයි අපි මේ අරමුණු සහ මේ සියල්ලම පස්ස වේදනා සංඥා චේත ඒ සියල්ලම යම්කිසි විදිහකට මේ මහා දුක්ඛ ඛන්දයට උපකාර වෙන විදිහට සංස්කාරය ඇති වෙන්නේ අපේ ඇතුළාන්තෙම තියෙන හේතු ටිකක් හින්දා. මේ බාහිරින් ඇති වුණ හේතු ටිකක් නෙමෙයි. ඒ බාහිර හේතු ටික පදනම් කරාගෙන අපි තව ඇතුළාන්තේ තව සංස්කාරික ධර්මයෝ ටිකක් අපි නිෂ්පාදනය කරා ගන්නවා තව මෙන්න මේ භවයට සහ මේ උපාදානය තුලින් තව මේ භවයට ඇලෙන්න. Again, everything that we have sort of gone through sort of negates that whatever that creates is suffering that we are going through, individual, whatever suffering that we might be personally going through right at this very moment, dissatisfactoriness with something or the other, all of that, whilst we would love to assume that that suffering has been brought about by a single individual outside, right? But if we are to look at this very moment, the reason that I am suffering is because the whole mass of dukkha has been sort of grown within me by my own intuition, reasons, needs, and all of that. Because I have the latent tendencies, right? Some would sort of refute this and say, no, this person did me wrong, that person did you wrong, understood. That is clear. People have done us a great amount of wrong, just as maybe in samsara we have done a great amount of wrong ourselves through this journey. However, the reason that we are suffering in the present, is it not because I am hanging on to something that has happened for sure and seeking sort of whatever it is that I want out of it to such an extent where now I cannot get away and move on from the pain? How do I keep this pain aside? How do I reach a state of emancipation from the pain that I am going through at this very moment? Isn't your pleasure, your happiness important? Right? That is what we mean by the fact of taking that ownership. The fact of pain at this very moment is caused by us because we are unable to let go, because we are unable to see the reality, the fragility of my mind, our mind, as well as the minds and the human experience all around us. What is next? The unconscious arising of suffering. If one neither intends nor plans, but if one still has latent tendency, this becomes a mental base for the support for consciousness. When there is a mental basis, consciousness is established. When that consciousness is established and grows, there is a descent of name and form, right? What is this descent of name and form? Nama rupasa avakkanti. where there is further arising of rebirth, is placed between the consciousness and the six sense bases. Taken together, the Moliya Panguna Sutta and the Cetanā Sutta too imply that the descent of the name and form and the further continued arising of rebirth are interchangeable, synonymous, right? Are interchangeable, synonymous. This, notes Bodhi, in spite of the commentarial predilection for always seeing the latter as karmically active existence, or we always seeing the latter as karmically active existence, right? In the fact of karmically active existence brought about by the sanskaras, which are fueled by that same karma that we have created through the sanskaras, through the javana processes of mind, right? So if bhikkhus, one neither intends nor plans, this becomes, but if one has latent tendency, this becomes a mental basis for the support for consciousness. When there is a mental basis, consciousness is established. When that consciousness is established and grows, there is the descent of name and form. There is the descent of name and form. Something that we must note is the fact that when it comes to anusaya, it is maintained the majority of Buddhist teachings and teachers believe or speak of only anusaya in the sense of unwholesome, not in the sense of wholesome, right? What would that also then say? To the same that we have just discussed, the raising of conscious awareness, the raising of conscious energy within, right, would also then enable a person through the rising or the raising of mind, right, to a position where a being is able to live without creating or without further instilling strong bonds connected to the anusayas, right? Or, I'm sorry, to ditti, vichikiccha, kama, patika, bhava, avijja. Now we have these six, right? Ditti, if you go with kama, patika, bhava, avijja, mananusaya, and ditti and vichikiccha anusaya. We have these eight, right? These 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7. We have these 7 anusayas. These 7 anusayas. Now, what kind of thought, right, would go into cognition, thought, thinking, without aggravating the anusayas or without further facilitating and fueling the anusayas is maybe another important question we need to ask. Can I think without the anusayas? Even though the anusayas might be present, the energy of the latent tendencies, the possibility and the potential of the latent tendencies are there because I am not enlightened. However, am I able to think and conduct myself in a manner where I am not experiencing, or further facilitating or energizing the anusayas? Do you think it is possible? I think it is very much possible, right? The mundane and supramundane patterns of thought, right? The mundane and the supramundane Eightfold Noble Path is an exact frame for the same, right? Is the exact frame for the same where we are able to truly cultivate a practice, cultivate a way of life, which does not drag us down to the grind, to the hold of the anusayas again. Right? So it is possible, everyone. Right? It is possible. That is where, again, those are what these meditations that we spoke about. Metta, Anusati, and Anicca. That is where that all comes in again. Because those directly allow a person, even during the hardest and the most challenging of times, to constantly have a sense of awareness, not, and it naturally happens in a way where you'll be able to maintain that awareness and presence, where we will not be falling and working towards the sort of the push of the anusayas again. Now let us see. There is a descent of name and form. With name and form as condition, there is a sixfold sense space. With the sixfold sense space as condition, there is contact. With contact, feeling. Feeling, craving. With craving, there is clinging. Clinging as condition, there is existence. With existence as condition, there is birth. With birth as condition, there is decay, death, sorrow, lamentation, physical pain. Now look, the word that they are using, condition. This word condition, right, with contact as condition. For contact to arise as condition means that inertly when there is contact, contact demands something, right? Contact will persist. What it does, it will have the sparsha. That sparsha as condition, when that sparsha is present, there will be feeling. When that feeling is present as a condition, there will be craving. Right? When that feeling is present, there will be craving. When craving is present as a condition, there is clinging. With clinging as condition, there is existence. With existence as condition, there is birth. With birth as condition, there arise decay, death, sorrow, lamentation, physical pain, mental pain, and despair. Such is the arising of this whole mass of suffering. Right? This whole mass of suffering. The dependent ending of suffering. But bhikkhus, insofar as one does not intend and one does not plan and one does not have the latent tendency, then there is no mental basis for the support of consciousness. When there is no mental basis, consciousness is not established. When consciousness is not established and does not grow, there is no descent of name and form. With the ending of name and form, the sixth sense basis end. With the ending of the sixth sense basis, contact ends. With the ending of contact, feeling ends. With the ending of feeling, craving ends. With the ending of craving, clinging ends. With the ending of clinging, existence ends. With the ending of existence, birth ends. With the ending of birth, there end decay and death, sorrow, lamentation, physical pain, mental pain, despair. All of this that we go through, is because we take this sort of sense space and we have a sparsha that arises, and this can very well fall into our own very lives, not at a molecular sort of parisampada level, but even a gross sense. අපි ඇස් දෙක තියෙන හින්දා අපි ඇස් දෙකෙන් බලනවා. ඒ ඇස් දෙක ඇරියාම යම්කිසි ස්පර්ශයක් හටගන්නවා. ඒ ස්පර්ශය හටගත්තු හේතුවෙන් යම්කිසි වේදනාවක් හටගන්නවා. ඒ වේදනාවට යම්කිසි ඒ වේදනාව හටගත්තු යම්කිසි ඇලීමක් හටගන්නවා ඒ හටගත්ත වේදනාවට. ඒ හටගත්ත වේදනාව කෙරෙහි ඇලීමක් හටගත්තේ හින්දා ඒ ඇලීම කෙරෙහි තියෙන තෘෂ්ණාව පදනම් කරගෙන උපාදානය හටගන්නවා. ඒ උපාදානය හටගත්තම අපේ මුළු ජීවිතේම ඒ අරමුණ කෙරෙහි නම් වෙනවා, නැමෙනවා. ඒ අපේ ජීවිතේම ඒ අරමුණ වෙනුවෙන් කියන මේ සංකල්පය අපේ හිතේ ඇති වෙනවා. ඒ අපේ හිතේ සංකල්පය ඇති වුණේ හින්දාම ඒ දුකට හේතුව තව අපි නඩත්තු කරනවා. ඒ දුකට හේතුව තව අපි නඩත්තු කරනවා. ඒ නඩත්තු කරන හේතුවෙන් ආපව ඒ දුකම ඇති වෙනවා. ඒ දුකම ඇති වෙන හේතුවෙන් ඒ දුකෙන් පෙළීලා ඒ දුක්ඛ දෝමනස්ස උපායාස දැන් මේක දුක විඳිනවා. ඒ දුකට හේතුව දැන් දුකට හේතුව කෙරෙහිනේ උපාදානය ඇති වුනේ. දැන් මේ අවස්ථාවේ ඒ දුක විඳිනවා. දැන් ඒ දුක ඇති වෙලා ඒ දුක විඳි ජීවත් වෙනවා. So that can be applied. See, the reason behind all of the pain that we go through is because of the fact that we experienced something with a lack of awareness, with a lack of awareness, which would have very easily pointed to us that, look, none of this will remain the same. This too will one day pass. Just as all great men and women and beings and persons of this world have been great once and passed into nothing, this too will pass. Just as the greatest beings of this universe, as great as the Buddhas themselves have passed, this too will pass. Just as the great collective universes, the collection of 1,000, 100,000 universes have arisen to their glory and passed, this too will pass. The assumption that this will remain the same brings great suffering to our lives, to the lives of persons around us, to the lives of those who come into contact with us as we carry this suffering forward. This suffering bridging from avidya, blindness. The fact that whilst we can see and we've experienced impermanence moment to moment, yet we choose not to see. That is the end of second sutra. So I'm going to leave it there, everyone, for today. Right, I'm going to leave it there. And do we have any questions?
Just to say sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So absolutely true, Bhante, because I heard all this word, not with the Buddha saying, and you reiterate the same thing. Why? That's why that sati, or that it's so important of the Bojjhanga. And this awareness that this too will pass, and anicca vicca, dhamma vicca, and therefore that is where the whole the point is when we do meditation, and you let it go and let it go, whichever you do. And why you do metta-anusati, why you have to see when you're frustrated, and why you let go, why Bhante, you said it so beautiful. I just say sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Teruvan saranai.
Teruvan saranai. Yes, Mother.
Bhante, you said anusaya is wholesome, and unwholesome. Sorry, anusaya is unwholesome, and it wasn't clear to me when you said how not to let the anusaya to come up. Is it with the 3 bhavanas, or
okay,
how do you keep the anusaya at bay without letting it rise up?
Yes. So what I mentioned is anusaya is only unwholesome. Anusaya creates further bonds to samsara, right? This anusaya, how do we relate or keep a mind that does not fall into anusaya? The perfect frame that we find, which would fit that sort of a practice, living beyond the anusaya, beyond the hold of the anusaya, would then be the Eightfold Noble Path, right? The Eightfold Noble Path. The Eightfold Noble Path Look, Samma Ditti. Samma Ditti, the knowledge of the Dharma, right? The knowledge of the Dharma. The Dharma in terms of what creates Miccha Ditti. Let's ask the question then, what is Miccha Ditti? Karma phala pilibanda viswasyak numati. Babe. Karma phala, past births, past and future births, right? Past and future births, the existence of enlightened beings, all of that are Padidhasampada, Four Noble Truths, and the Eightfold Noble Path. Having no belief in these four is considered Miccha Ditti. Then having knowledge, capacity of belief over these things would be considered Samma Ditti. Right? ඒ කියන්නේ ධර්මයේ තේරුම් ගැනීමේ ශක්තිය තෙක්කම ධර්මයේ දන්න ස්වභාවය. The fact that we know the Dhamma falls into this. Right? Samma Ditti. Samma Sankappa would go into now we know the Dhamma. Right? We have the Samma Ditti, we believe in the Dhamma through practice. However, Samma Sankappa has the Dhamma, the conviction of Dhamma. Is it strong enough that it is the way that we think? Etanta thamai anicca සංඥාව, මෙත්ත භාවනාව, ආනුසති භාවනාව වැටෙන්නේ. Right? මේ අවස්ථාවේ දැන් යමෙක් යම් මිනිසෙක් හිතන්න පුළුවන්, යම් කෙනෙක් හිතන්න පුළුවන් යම් මිනිසෙක් හිතන්න පුළුවන් දැන් මේ කොටස් ටික සති සම්මා සති සම්මා සමාධි පැත්තට වැටෙන්න පුළුවන්. It can go there if it is for sati. In the Samma Ditti, Samma Sankappa phase, the bhavana helps us to do what? To further elaborate upon, know with experience the Dhamma that we have learned. Right? The Maitri Bhavanawa Karnuta apitama තේරුම් ගන්න පුළුවන් වෙනවා ඇයි මම මේ මනුස්සයට මෛත්‍රී කරන්නේ. Right? මේ කිසිම ගුණයක් නැති, කිසිම හොඳ වැඩක් කරන්නේ නැති මේ මහා නිකන් නම් මනුස්සයාට මේ මනුස්සයා මම මොනවටද මේ මෛත්‍රී කරන්නේ? ඒකට the reason for that, or why am I doing this? The question is answered through the practice. Right? That further instills the Samma Ditti, Samma Sankappa. දැන් අපේ මනස ධර්මයට එක්කම වැඩ කරනවා. ධර්මයට එක්ක වැඩ කරාම කොහෙටද අහු වෙන්නේ? කාමරාග අනුසයට අහු වෙනවද? Right? කාමරාග අනුසයට, පටිඝ අනුසයට. දැන් අපි කාමරාගය පිළිබඳව ගත්තොත් කාමරාග අනුසය, පටිඝ අනුසය, කාමරාග අනුසය ගත්තොත්. If you are going to take කාමරාග අනුසය, කාමරාග is කාමයට තිබෙන ඒ කැමැත්ත ඇලුම් ගතිය. Right? ඔතකොට දැන් අපි මොන අවස්ථාවල් වලදීද බොහෝ වෙලාවට දැන් අපි මේ ජීවිතේ කාමයේ කියලා බොහෝ වෙලාවට තියෙන්නේ මේ අපි the things that we eat, right? The houses that we have, the cars or whatever facilities that we have, right? All of these things are the pleasures that we can bring. If a person is able to now use the teachings on reflection, which is Paccavekkhana. Paccavekkhana allows us to consume food for the reason of consumption, for the reason intended. To maintain and use houses for the reason intended of the house. Right? To not get grappled and caught into the useless sort of insinuations and the satisfaction of people around us. මේ ගෙදර තියෙන්නේ for the protection, so that we can comfortably practice the Dhamma, to ward off the heat and the cold, insects and flies and all of these sort of critters, right? Paccavekkhana. Paccavekkhana becomes a powerful tool to ward off Kama Anusaya. Patiga Anusaya, Patigaya, Maitriya. He made Maitriya, Patiga. Bhava Anusaya, Anicca Sanyama. Ditthiya Anusaya, Vichikiccha, Ditthiya Anusaya, Dharma Manasikara. Vichikicchava, Samadhiya, right? Vichikiccha, Samadhi, and also Metta also comes into Vichikiccha because you really start sort of, the Vichikiccha is affected by the Metta as well. So the Vichikiccha goes away. So through Samadhi and Metta, right? And Avijja Anusaya, again, Dharma Manasikara and Samadhi. See? ඒටික තියෙනවා නම් උතුට අර පැත්තට වැටෙන්නේ නැහැ. Right? We are able to maneuver or bring together strong practice where we are able to now maneuver ourselves proper. Maneuver ourselves proper. There are intricacies. Now, these intricacies would require you to have cutthroat kalyana mitras. Cutthroat. Right? Cutthroat. They must be cutthroat Kalyan Mitras who would really call you out for your BS. Right? You really need that because meditators, who are around me now, because I don't meet most of you guys, right? Because you all are living far away. But the ones that I meet, you see, kochchara than bhavana, all of the abhidharma, all of these things are happening. But the high-mindedness that comes from maybe the profession, the wealth, all of these things still sort of coming through, right? And now it has added, Dharma Mana has also added to that, right? Because we don't study the normal Dhamma, we study the Abhidhamma. We are not commoners like that, we are posh. Now that has also added, which has become a big problem. Now I'm trying to figure out how to be the cutthroat Kalyana Mitra in a way, right? We really need that cutthroat Kalyana Mitra who would really call a spade, not in a hostile manner, but who would really just say, look, you need to wake up. You've taken this in a way where you are now becoming like a witch of Dhamma. A witch, male and female, by the way, or both sides, not just just to clear that out, right? This, you need to have that cutthroat sense of Kalyana Mitra who are able to tell you what is what, right? Then we are able to then work on getting rid of those gross parts of our gross parts, getting rid of those gross parts that we would not usually see, right? Getting rid of those gross parts that we would not usually see. Then we can work on that through the Dharma Vitakka again, right? That is really important. That is really important. The Buddha talks about the Dhamma, the mirror of Dhamma, reflecting on the fact of whether there has been progress in the practice, in sort of cultivating new practices that were there, new practices which were there, or qualities which were there, and also to the fact of getting rid of things which were not there. Which were there, and sort of reducing the unwholesome which was there. So the Dhamma, the mirror of Dhamma as well. But sometimes we are so good at fooling ourselves that even the mirror of Dhamma, we sort of mirror something that is utterly not true. So we truly do need that sense of Kalyana Mitraship, where we are able to sort of get that sort of sense of a reality check, right? So that is how, Mala, we would then be able to navigate ourselves in a manner beyond the hold of the anusayas, right? Beyond the hold of the anusayas, right? Now let us say then, then we all have our quirks, especially now when it comes to, we might find it very easy to do the house the Pachavekana on the house, Pachavekana on the other things. But when it comes to, for example, food, it can be quite a difficult position, right? However, now to start off with, we could even, just to start off, we could even sort of adopt the pattern of thinking where we look at this food and we realize the true nature of impermanence that we have. Yes, there is this rasa that is arising, is impermanent in nature. It will arise and pass away. So there is nothing for me to cling. So whatever is of this present is all that it is. Because sometimes, when it comes, the Vanchaka dharmas is something to keep an eye out for. Because then we start saying, even, we would start pretending and fooling ourselves and say, the food is really tasty and it's good. But we lie to ourselves and lie to others and say, oh no. So, that's, what I mean? That is even worse of a kilesa than actually enjoying the food, right? So being truthful, right? Being realistic with your practice and really contemplating or bringing yourself to contemplate the true reality of all of this, which becomes important. Yes? I hope I've answered the question to a certain extent. Now, any other questions?
Bhante, excuse me.
Yes, Sujata. Yes.
A lovely word I learned today, which I had not known earlier.
Okay.
Dharmamane.
What was the word, please?
Dharmamane.
Dharma. Okay.
Yeah, new word to me, I don't know.
Okay.
Lovely.
Yeah. Yeah. So the Buddha says, speaks of Dharmamana and persons who use the Dhamma not for its intended purpose, right? Use it for it's in, because I when we sort of see, when we've not had it, or when we still had it, or when we are dwelling deep, I mean, we see so much of truth in this Dhamma, so much. Even to you professionals who are like doctors and who understand science, and sometimes it's so sort of inspiring, because you see so much and you sort of think, my God, my word, how 2,600 years ago, we are still sort of dwelling into this now, but and this is there, and you are surprised, bewildered almost, that this is in the Dhamma, and it calls, as we go in sort of excavating and realizing and sort of seeing these, sort of reading these parts of Dhamma, it brings out a sense of pride in this practice that we are adhering to. That pride can very easily turn sour, can very easily turn to now using the Dharma to now sort of assume a sense of high-mindedness or a high-positioned nature, right? A high-positioned nature. But remember, the ego self, the Buddha has said, is a manyana, an hallucination. It does not exist, right? And if the Dhamma that is supposed to enlighten us is going to give us the manyana that we are so trying to get rid of, or the hallucinations of tanha, ditthi, mara that we are trying to get rid of, then of course, what are we doing with the Dhamma, right? What are we doing with that Dhamma? All right. So Pushpa, yes, Pushpa. Oh, sorry, Shriyani, you can go ahead.
Bhante, what is the exact meaning of Pachavekka?
Pachavekana. So Pachavekana is reflection, right?
Yeah.
Pachavekana, ekane prati, right? Vekshava. Prati vekshava. Prati kila kiyanne අපේ ජීවිතය පවත්වන්න උපකාරී වෙන ප්‍රත්ති කියලා කියන්නේ objects, things that support life. So food, medicines, clothing and housing, right? These are the basic necessities of life. Needs is a word that is used. These are needs. You have to have a house, you have to have clothing, you have to have medicines, you have to have food to support life. ප්‍රතිවේක්ෂා. ඒ කියන්නේ මේ ප්‍රති පාවිච්චි කරන අපි ප්‍රයෝජනයට ගන්න හේතුන් පිළිබඳව ආවර්ජනා කිරීම. Right? ආවර්ජනා කිරීම. Is that understood? Shani?
Yes. So, Pachavekkhana is Pratyavekshana. That means a reflection, right? Yeah. Of your basic necessities.
Of the basic necessities that the basic necessities that support life. Right? So that's prati. Prati කියලා කියන්නේ පච්චවේක්ඛනාවට prati කියලා කියන්නේ ඒක.
Okay.
Right? So what the Buddha says is when you are consuming, these are the main things that we consume. Right? When we consume these things for its intended purpose, we do not get dragged along into the whirlpool of sort of karma, bhava, and all of these things. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a reflection of the basic necessities. Yeah, okay, intended. Okay.
All right.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Bill?
One question.
You have to get off one device.
Yes, Bhante. Bhante, this Mala mentioned about we all have gadgets. I'm not aware of any gadgets, Bhante, or I don't know something.
The Buddhanusati tickers, the score counters.
Where can we get them, Bhante?
I posted it on the group some time ago. It's on Amazon. Score counter. I'll post it again. I'll send it to you.
Thank you very much, Bhante. Thank you.
All right. Pushpa, yes?
Bhante, can I ask you to explain cutthroat concept, cutthroat Kalyana Mitra?
Yeah. So one aspect of a Kalyana Mitra, the Buddha says, Kalyana Mitras are people who have the best intention of you at heart, in a Dhammic sense, without attachment.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Without that sense of attachment, because when attachment, it gets very complicated because then they want you to be in their vision. That is not Kalyana Mitra, that's manipulation. Right? Yeah. So the Buddha says, however, මේ කට්ටිය අපේ ජීවිතය තුළ ඉඳලා වැඩක් නැහැ. අපි මේ කට්ටියකින් වැඩ ගන්න නැතුව. මොකද්ද අපි ගන්න වැඩේ? Which is discussion. නිරන්තරයෙන්ම අපේ තියෙන වැරදි හෝ අපේ තියෙන the quirks that we have in our life, or the things that we are sort of shy to discuss, or things that we don't want to put out, or insecurities or whatnot. ධර්මයේ අනුසාරයෙන් මේ කට්ටියත් එක්ක සාකච්ඡා කිරීම. Right? ඔතකොට තියෙනවා ඒකෙම ඒ කල්යාණ මිත්‍රයාට තමන්ට ආවාදයක් උපදේශයක් දෙන්න ඉඩක් තමන් නිර්මාණය කරන්නේ නැත්තම් කල්යාණ මිත්‍රයාගේ ප්‍රයෝජන සම්පූර්ණ ප්‍රයෝජනේ ගන්නෙ නැහැ අපි. You get what I mean?
Yes.
Right? Yeah. That is what it means. Because if a Kalyana Mitra, right? Now let us say that, of course, as friends, we help each other, right?
Yes.
Right? That is what we do. We help each other, we support each other, by sometimes even through material things, right?
Yeah.
Now, if the Kalyana Mitra, because of this sort of support that we receive, we feel like, oh, how can I tell she helps me so much, or how can I break her heart like this? Now, ඒක කල්යාණ මිත්‍රකමක් නෙමෙයි. Right? Now, which is not going to give you the passport to be an absolute rude person to your, Kalyana. No, that is not what. A person who is not afraid, or he's not going to hold back in a sense of hiding from you what you need to work on. Not in a derogatory way at all. A Kalyana Mitra, someone who thinks about you, will always think of you in a compassionate manner. And this message needs to be delivered with such compassion as well. Right? Such compassion at the right time, place, and all of that. because we know the complications of having such a conversation, right? ඒක හින්දා තමයි බුදුහාඳුරු කියන්නේ කල්යාණ මිත්‍රයත් එක්ක ධර්මයේත් එක්කම හැසිරෙන්න. ඒ කියන්නේ තමන්ගේ කල්යාණ මිත්‍රයත් එක්ක බොන්න පටන් ගත්තට පස්සේ ඒ කල්යාණ මිත්‍ර ගතිය නැති වෙනවා. මොන හේතුවෙන්ද? මොකද එක ඩ්‍රින්ක් එකක් ගත්ත හේතුවෙන් නෙමෙයි. අර බොන්ඩ් එක වෙනස් වෙනවා. ඔතකොට දැන් මේ කල්යාණ මිත්‍ර අපිට මොකක් හරි වැරද්දක් පෙන්වලා දුන්නොත් අපිට හිතේවි ඇයි වාත් මේක කරේ? ඒ වගේ ගතියක් අපිට කල්යාණ මිත්‍රෙක් හෝ ඒ වගේ සිතුවිල්ලක් අපිට කල්යාණ මිත්‍රෙක් කෙරෙහි ඇති වෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඇයි ඔයා මේම කරේ කියලා කියන්න තරම්. මොකද අපිට මේ කල්යාණ මිත්‍ර අතර යම්කිසි සුහඳ සම්බන්ධයක් තියෙනවා, ගරුත්වයක් තියෙනවා.
Yeah.
There is a mutual sense of respect within one another.
Yeah.
Right? And that respect should not be compromised.
Right.
You get what I mean?
Yeah, and sometimes even the Dhamma can be our Kalyana Mitra. Is that right?
Well, the thing is, can the Dhamma be? The thing is, we do say so. The Dharma is a Kalyana Mitra on its own. But when it comes to looking at the most difficult parts of ourselves, if we don't want to look at them, how will we look through it through the Dhamma?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think so because of that, sometimes, because sometimes just having the Dhamma as a Kalyana Mitra might not suffice.
Yes, I agree with it. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, because I mean, we like to sort of thinavataraka, which is hiding things with the grass, putting some grass over it and making it look a bit proper. But the thing is, at the end, there is something festering underneath that grass. Yeah, and that is what needs to be looked at, right? But let us start from the small things and work ourselves, because without confidence, if we are lacking confidence to a certain extent, right? Then the Dhamma practice, metta and all of these practices that we talked about will give you the confidence that you need and require to realize, look, I don't need to be ashamed of this or that. I don't need to be ashamed of the fact that my son is like this. I don't need to be ashamed that, I have family issues. I don't need to be ashamed that I'm a widow or I'm a divorcee. I don't need to be ashamed of these things. These things are of the world. A confidence එක අපිට අවශ්‍යයි. මොකද බොහෝ මිනිස්සු මේව ගැන ලැජ්ජා වෙවි හැමදේම හංග ජීවත් වෙනකොට ඒක මේ තව ඇතුලේ කුණු වෙනවා විතරයි බොහෝ වෙලාවට. How does that sense of confidence arise? That sense of confidence arises through the practice. තමන්ටම මෛත්‍රී කරන්න. මිනිස්සුන්ට මෛත්‍රී කරන්න. උතර අපිට තේරෙනවා මිනිස්සු කොච්චර hina වෙලා ලස්සනට ඉන්න හිටියත් මාට අපිට හිතා ගන්න බැරි ප්‍රශ්න මේ පෞල් තුල මේ මිනිස්සුන්ට හිතවල පීඩා වෙනවා. ඒක තමයි යථාර්ථය. That is the truth.
The way it is.
Right? And we cannot, if we assume position of shame, then we will forever feel shame. Right? We cannot feel ashamed for living the human experience. This is the human experience. Right? So as a person, as a practitioner, අපිට ටික අපිට ඇති වෙන්න ඕන. ධර්මයේ ඉන්න මිනිස්සෙක් මේ හංග හොරා පැන මේ එව්ව කරන්නේ නැහැ. That is not a dharma, because when we look at the monastic code of conduct, you see everything. We've spoken about this before, right? We see everything there. Out in the open, right? There is no sense of shame because those practitioners realize, look, development, cultivation happens when the hard things, when the things difficult to see and talk about are talked about and seen. This is the reality of our life. කෙලස් එක්ක තමයි අපි වැඩ කරන්නේ. කෙලස් එක්ක වැඩ කරනකොට බොහෝ වෙලාවට our hands gets dirty.
Yeah.
So that is all the time that we have for today. We will continue on the sutra next week. I hope the questions that I've answered or discussed have been pertinent. Right.
Therwan Saranai Bhante.
Therwan Saranai, everyone. I will
Thank
see
you.
you all
Therwan
tomorrow
Saranai
morning
Bhante.
for the meditation. Therwan Saranai.
Therwan Saranai.
Teruvan saranai Bhante. Teruvan saranai.